Think about this. One man takes on the biggest empire the world had ever seen. What were his armies? Millions of everyday folks. His weapons? Not guns or bombs, but powerful ideas. So how did this one guy, with seemingly nothing but strong belief, pull off the impossible, freeing an entire nation from colonial rule? This is the incredible story of how Mahatma Gandhi won without weapons. The year was 1942, the place, India. And at the center of it all was Mahatma Gandhi. You might have heard of him. A man who led India to freedom from British colonial rule. But what's truly fascinating is not just that he led a nation to independence, but how he did it without weapons. No tanks, no fighter jets, not even simple protest signs, just the power of ideas. Gandhi's weapon of choice was nonviolent resistance, a philosophy that today is known around the world as the Mahatma's Way. This approach was far from conventional, especially in a time when violence and aggression were the norm in politics. But Gandhi believed in something different, something he called satyagraha, often translated as truth force or soul force. This wasn't just a political strategy. It was a way of life for Gandhi. It was based on the idea of seeking truth and justice through non-violent means. But why did Gandhi choose this path? Let's rewind a bit. India in the early 20th century was under the tight grip of the British Empire. They controlled every aspect of the nation, from its economy to its politics. The Indian people were fed up with this unjust rule. They wanted freedom, but they weren't sure how to get it. Then came Gandhi, offered a way forward, a path that didn't involve spilling blood or waging violent rebellions. Instead, it was a journey guided by truth and achieved through nonviolent resistance. Gandhi's methods were simple, yet powerful. He encouraged Indians to refuse to cooperate with the British government, to pay their taxes, to boycott British goods, and instead embrace homegrown alternatives. These acts of defiance were more than just symbolic gestures. They were calculated moves aimed at weakening the very foundations of British authority in India. By not participating in a system that oppressed them, the Indians were gradually dismantling the pillars of British rule. One of the most iconic instances of this was the Salt March of 1930. This event was a direct challenge to the British monopoly on salt production in India. At the time, the British government had a law that said Indians could only buy and sell salt that was stamped with a government seal. This meant that if you wanted to sell salt, you had to pay a high tax to the British. This tax was unfair, and Gandhi knew that the common people felt it deeply, so he decided to break the law. He led a group of 78 of his followers on a 240-mile walk to the sea. There they gathered seawater and boiled it down to produce their own salt. This act of defiance not only exposed the absurdity of the British salt tax, but also inspired countless Indians to join the movement for independence. It became a defining moment in India's struggle for freedom. Another key aspect of Gandhi's approach was the idea of civil disobedience. This involved peaceful acts of resistance like boycotting government institutions, refusing to obey unjust laws, or organizing mass protests. These actions were not meant to be disruptive. They were carefully planned strategies to expose the moral bankruptcy of the British Raj. For instance, when the British government passed a law requiring Indians to use a specific type of cloth, Gandhi and his followers refused to wear that cloth. They chose to wear homespun cloth instead, which was made from locally available materials. This simple act of defiance was part of a larger strategy to promote Indian craftsmanship and reduce dependence on British manufactured goods. Now, it's important to understand that Gandhi's philosophy wasn't just about passive resistance. It demanded courage, commitment, and a willingness to face the consequences of one's actions. Those who followed Gandhi often faced imprisonment, torture, or even death. Yet they stood firm in their belief in the right to self-rule. His unwavering commitment to the cause made the movement unstoppable. But how did ordinary people get involved in this extraordinary movement? Well, Gandhi had a knack for making the complex simple. He spoke a language that everyone could understand. He appealed to the basic human values of truth, justice, and equality. This made his philosophy accessible to people from all walks of life. Villagers, shopkeepers, students, teachers, all came together under the banner of nonviolent resistance. They formed groups that organized protests, boycotts, and other forms of civil disobedience. For example, in the early 1940s, when India's largest city, Bombay, was reeling under the impact of World War II, Gandhi called for a strike. He asked people to stop working for the British war effort. At first, it seemed like a crazy idea. How could they fight back against the mighty British Empire? But as more and more people joined the strike, it became clear that they had the power to make a difference. In the end, the strike lasted for 8 days and brought the city to a standstill. It was one of the biggest acts of civil disobedience in the history of the city. And it's not just the big cities where this was happening. The countryside, people were organizing themselves into self-governing communities. They set up schools, clinics, and courts to serve their people. They also formed militias to protect their villages from outside threats. All of this was done without violence. It was a remarkable achievement, considering the oppressive environment created by the British Raj. However, this peaceful revolution wasn't without its challenges. There were times when violence erupted between the British forces and the Indian protesters. But even in those moments, Gandhi stood firm on his principles. He never wavered in his commitment to nonviolent resistance. He believed that violence only begets violence, and that the true path to freedom lay in love and forgiveness. One of the most testing times came during the Quit India movement of 1942. This was a mass campaign to force the British to leave India. It started with a rally in Bombay, where Gandhi gave a rousing speech calling for independence. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of thousands of people joined the movement, but the British government reacted with brutal force. They arrested Gandhi and many of his followers, but this only fueled the movement. Ordinary Indians took to the streets. They protested, they boycotted, they revolted. It was a nationwide uprising unlike anything India had ever seen. In the end, the Quit India movement forced the British to reconsider their hold on India. Though they didn't immediately grant independence, they did begin to negotiate. The seeds of change were sown, and in 1947, India finally won its freedom. Now let's step back and think about what Gandhi and his followers accomplished. They took on one of the most powerful empires in history and won. They did it without weapons, without violence, and without resorting to brute force. They won because they were willing to stand up for their beliefs, to face the consequences, and to fight for their freedom with the weapon that Gandhi called the mightiest in the world, the weapon of truth. When we look back at Gandhi's legacy, it's easy to see why he's revered as the father of India. He wasn't just a leader, he was a beacon of hope, a symbol of courage, and a champion of the oppressed. His methods may have been unconventional, but their effectiveness was undeniable. He showed the world that one person with a strong belief can indeed make a difference. He showed us that we don't need weapons to fight for our rights. All we need is the courage of our convictions and the willingness to fight for what we believe in. As we wrap up this episode, let's remember the lessons of Mahatma Gandhi. Let's remember that the pursuit of truth and justice is a worthy cause. Let's remember that courage and commitment are powerful allies. Let's remember that we don't need weapons to fight for freedom. All we need is the strength of our convictions. Thank you for joining me on this journey through history. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like, comment, and share. Your engagement means the world to me. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. I would love to have you back for more episodes. Till next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and remember the power of one.